All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into Buddhism. We've got some excerpts from a History of Buddhism presentation. And, it's fascinating stuff. Like, did you know it all started with a prince?
A prince.
Yeah, Siddhartha Gautama became known as the Buddha,
Oh,
meaning the enlightened one,
yeah.
way back in the 6th century BCE in ancient India.
Really? A prince.
Yeah,
That is captivating. But what's even more interesting, I think, is how his journey led to this whole philosophy. That still resonates with millions of people today.
right. And it's all rooted in these four noble truths. The first one being that suffering is just part of life.
Hmm.
Kind of a bummer way to start, I guess.
Right.
But you got to acknowledge the reality, right?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that suffering is a universal experience, not some, uniquely personal burden.
Okay, so suffering exists,
Right.
but then the second truth digs deeper. It says that the root of all this suffering is craving and attachment. And we're not just talking about material things here. It goes way deeper than that.
Yeah, it does. This is where the concept of samudaya comes in. It explores how craving and attachment extend beyond possessions to our ideas, beliefs, even our sense of self.
Really?
Think about, you see that notification on your phone, and there's this instant craving for validation, for that little dopamine hit. But how often does that actually leave you feeling satisfied?
Wow, yeah. That's a
Yeah.
perfect example. So constantly chasing those likes or that next achievement, that's all fueled by craving.
Precisely. And the presentation even highlights how clinging to the idea of continued existence or fearing non-existence contributes to suffering.
Yeah.
It's a profound observation about the human condition.
Okay, hold on. So if we're all wired to crave, where's the hope in all of this?
That's where the third noble truth comes in, Nirodha. It suggests that escaping this cycle of suffering is actually possible.
Okay.
It's about eliminating that craving and attachment. To reach nirvana, a
Ravana.
state of peace and freedom from suffering.
So it's not about denying ourselves everything or becoming like emotionless robots, but more about transforming how we relate to our desires.
Yes, it's about understanding that true liberation comes from letting go of that tight grip we have on things, that constant need for things to be a certain way.
Easier said than done, right?
Absolutely. But that's where the fourth noble truth steps in. It introduces the Eightfold Path, a practical guide to help us move away from suffering and towards liberation.
So this eightfold path is like the map to get to nirvana.
You could say that. It's more of a framework for living, not a rigid set of rules.
Okay.
It's all about finding balance in 8 interconnected aspects of life.
8 aspects. Feels like there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, there's one thing that caught my eye in the presentation. The 3 jewels of Buddhism. They're mentioned, but not really explained. What's the deal with those?
Ah, good catch. The 3 jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, the teachings,
Yeah.
and the Sangha, the community. They are considered the foundation of Buddhist practice. The Buddha represents the guide, the Dharma represents the path, and the Sangha represents the support system on the journey.
So you're not just going it alone on this path to liberation. You've got the teachings and a whole community to help you along the way.
Exactly. It's a reminder that while individual practice is important, connection and support are crucial.
Okay, so we've got the 4 noble truths laying out the problem and the solution, the 3 jewels as the support system, and this eightfold path as the map to get there.
And you know what's fascinating about the Eightfold Path?
What is that?
It's not just about personal liberation. It also encourages us to create a more just and compassionate world.
I'm curious about that. How does this personal transformation translate into a wider impact?
Well, let's take a look at just 2 aspects of the Eightfold Path: right speech and right livelihood. Right speech emphasizes speaking truthfully, kindly, and with intention, recognizing the power of words to harm or to heal. Imagine the impact that would have if everyone practiced that.
Right. I think about all the negativity and conflict. That could be avoided if we all chose our words more mindfully.
And then there's right livelihood,
Wow.
which encourages us to earn a living in a way that doesn't cause harm to others. It's about aligning our work with our values and considering the impact of our choices on the world.
Yeah, that one hits close to home. It
Listen.
makes you really think about how you're contributing to society and whether your actions are in line with your ethical principles.
Exactly. These 2 aspects alone show how the Eightfold Path can ripple outwards from personal practice to create positive change in the world.
Okay, so we've dipped our toes into the eightfold path, but I'm ready to dive deeper.
Let's do it. There's so much more to explore about each of those 8 steps and how they intertwine to create a truly fulfilling life.
All right, so we're ready to unpack this eightfold path. It's not just a list of rules, right? But 8 interconnected aspects of life.
Precisely. It's often depicted as a wheel, emphasizing that each aspect supports and strengthens the others. They work together to cultivate a more balanced and fulfilling life.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, we could start with right understanding. This is about developing a clear and accurate understanding of ourselves and the world around us, based on the Four Noble Truths.
Okay, so before you can even start walking the path, you need to understand the terrain.
Exactly. Then comes right thought, or right intention, which builds upon that understanding. It's about cultivating thoughts that are wholesome, kind, and free from greed, hatred, and delusion.
Hmm. I'm sensing a theme here. Buddhism seems to emphasize a lot of mental discipline.
It does. And that's because our thoughts shape our actions and ultimately our experiences. But it's not about suppressing thoughts or emotions. It's about becoming aware of them and choosing to cultivate those that lead to peace and well-being.
So it's not about being perfect, but about becoming more aware
Yeah,
and making conscious choices.
exactly. And that awareness is further cultivated through right mindfulness, another key aspect of the Eightfold Path.
Right. Mindfulness seems to be a buzzword these days. What does it actually mean in the context of Buddhism?
It's about paying attention to the present moment, without judgment, noticing your thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise, without getting swept away by them.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? We live in a world of constant distractions. It seems impossible to just shut off all that noise.
It's definitely a practice, not a switch you can just flip on. Meditation is a powerful tool for cultivating mindfulness. But it can also be as simple as paying attention to your breath, noticing the sensations of your feet on the ground, or really savoring each bite of your food.
Okay, so it's about bringing that awareness into everyday activities, not just sitting on a cushion and meditating for hours.
Exactly. And that brings us to right speech, right action, and right livelihood, which we touched on earlier. These aspects encourage us to act ethically, speak kindly, and engage in work that is aligned with our values and doesn't cause harm to others.
Right. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Right.
Understanding informs right thought, which leads to right speech and right action. It's a chain reaction.
Yeah, precisely. And then the last two aspects, right effort and right concentration, provide the fuel and focus needed to stay on the path.
Okay, so right effort is about, what, trying really hard to be a good person?
It's more nuanced than that. It's about cultivating a wholesome and balanced effort in all areas of life, not pushing ourselves to the point of exhaustion, but also not being complacent or lazy.
And right concentration, that sounds intense.
It's about developing the ability to focus our minds,
Mhm.
to quiet the mental chatter, and cultivate a state of deep concentration. This is where meditation plays a key role.
So meditation isn't just about relaxation. It's about training the mind to be more focused and clear.
Exactly. And that clarity is essential for breaking free from the cycle of craving and attachment.
You know, I think a lot of people might associate Buddhism with detaching from the world, becoming a monk, and meditating on a mountaintop.
That's a common misconception. While monastic life is certainly a path within Buddhism, the core teachings are meant to be applicable to everyone, regardless of lifestyle.
So you can be a parent, a teacher,
Yeah,
an entrepreneur, and still benefit from these principles.
absolutely. It's about integrating these values of compassion, mindfulness, and ethical conduct into your daily interactions and decisions, no matter what your life looks like.
That makes it much more accessible, right? It's not about escaping the world, but engaging with it in a more mindful and compassionate way.
Exactly. It's about finding a way to live a more meaningful and fulfilling life, even amidst the inevitable challenges and difficulties we all face.
I'm also really curious about this idea of nirvana. Is it like heaven in other religions, a place you go after you die?
Nirvana isn't a physical place. It's a state of being, a liberation from suffering, achieved by transcending craving and attachment.
So it's something you can experience in this lifetime.
Yes, it's possible to have glimpses of that peace and freedom through practice and insight. It's not so much an end goal as a continual process of awakening and liberation.
That's a really interesting concept. It's not a destination, but a journey of transformation.
And that journey, as Buddhism teaches, is ultimately about understanding ourselves and our place in the interconnected web of existence.
Speaking of interconnectedness, we haven't even touched on karma yet. Let's deal with that.
Karma. It's often misunderstood. In Buddhism, karma is simply cause and effect. Every action has a consequence, shaping our future experiences.
So it's not about cosmic punishment or reward.
Not in the sense of a judging deity. It's more like a natural law of consequence. Our actions, whether mental, verbal, or physical, create imprints that influence not only this life, but also future rebirths.
Whoa, rebirth, that's a whole other concept to unpack.
Yes, and it's a key distinction. Between Buddhism and some other religions, the idea is that we cycle through lives until we achieve liberation from suffering, through enlightenment.
Hmm. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, karma, rebirth. It's a complex yet interconnected system.
It is. But it ultimately boils down to this. We have the power to transform ourselves and create a more peaceful and compassionate world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From ancient origins to core teachings, practical steps, and even rebirth. I feel like I need some time to process all of this.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's an invitation to keep exploring, keep learning and growing, and you don't even have to be a Buddhist to benefit from these insights.
Exactly. It's like a toolkit for living a more mindful and meaningful life.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is amazing how these teachings that are thousands of years old still feel so relevant today.
It's the power of timeless wisdom, isn't it? The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path offer a framework for understanding and addressing suffering that transcends cultural and historical boundaries.
You know what strikes me most? This idea that the root of suffering is clinging, this constant grasping for things to be different. It's like we create our own suffering by resisting what is.
It is a profound insight, and one that's often overlooked in our fast-paced, achievement-oriented society. We're constantly bombarded with messages that tell us we need more, that we need to be better, that happiness lies somewhere in the future. Yeah. And all that striving just keeps us stuck on the hamster wheel of desire.
Exactly. Buddhism challenges us to step off that wheel, to find contentment in the present moment, and to recognize that true happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances.
So it's not about becoming passive or giving up on our goals, but rather about shifting our focus from external validation to internal fulfillment.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that true happiness isn't dependent on achieving some arbitrary standard of success or acquiring more possessions. It's about cultivating a deep sense of peace and contentment that comes from living in alignment with our values and cultivating a compassionate heart.
I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, regardless of their religious beliefs. We all experience suffering. We all crave happiness, and we're all searching for meaning and purpose.
Absolutely. And Buddhism offers a practical and compassionate path for doing just that. It's not a dogma or a set of rigid beliefs. It's an invitation to explore the nature of reality, to understand ourselves more deeply, and to live a more awakened and fulfilling life.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's like Buddhism offers a completely different perspective on life's challenges and finding true happiness.
It has for me as well. Revisiting these core teachings is always a reminder to approach life with more mindfulness, compassion, and gratitude.
You know, for everyone listening in, if the root of suffering is clinging, what are some things you might be holding on to too tightly? How might letting go actually lead to greater peace and freedom in your life?
Perhaps this deep dive can serve as a starting point for your own exploration of Buddhist thought.
It's certainly a journey worth taking.
It definitely is. And that wraps up our deep dive into Buddhism. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds open.